You already know what time it is. It's R3's time, where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. And what better way to do that than to rewrite and comprehend for your own understanding? So come on in. Let's get started. Let's get to it. Let me straighten out my screen here. As you know, we are reading The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. This book is excellent, excellent. It is #1 acclaimed for me. I put it at the top of my book list, period. I read this book back in 2015, and I'm glad that we have recycled and picked it up again. So if you haven't been reading with us, please get this book. It's called The History of White People, and it gives us a breakdown of where the term whiteness comes from in societal terms. It's very important that we understand that race, just like religion, is something that was a man-made construct in order to justify certain things that are happening in life today and also then. I'm going to read you a quick summary from the back of the book, and then I'll pass it over to the hostess with the mostest. So, the history of white people, and the author writes on the back and says, ever since the Enlightenment, race theory and the inevitable partner, racism, have followed a crooked road constructed by dominant peoples to justify their domination of others, filling a huge gap in historical literature that has long focused on the non-white eminent historian Nell Irvin Painter guides us through the more than 2,000 years of Western civilization, tracing not only the invention of the idea of race, but also the frequent worship of various white races for economic, social, and political ends. The History of White People is a mind-expanding and myth-destroying exploration of notions of white race, not merely a skin color, but also a signal of power, prestige, and beauty to be held to be withheld and granted selectively. So I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She's going to let you know a little bit more, and I will be back as we discuss The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. Back to you.
Hello. This is the host of the mostest. I was so coming at you, the Real Eyes Book Club, where we read every Tuesdays at 3. Right now, you can reach us at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and on the website, where you can like, share, follow for free, and you can also donate. Today, we'll be going over Chapter 1 of The History of White People, the Enlightenment, Science, and the Invention of the Caucasian Race. The author is going to set a stage for how the concept of race, particularly whiteness, has socially constructed over time. Some of the key points. The origins of the Caucasian concept. Painter explains how the term Caucasian emerged in the 18th century during the Enlightenment, when scientists like Johann Friedrich Blumenbach categorized humans into racial groups. Blumenbach idealized Caucasus Mountain region in Georgia, near Georgia, as an origin of the most beautiful human race, which he called Caucasian. This was based on pseudo-scientific ideas. In Racial Hierarchies, the chapter explores how enlightened thinkers use categorizations to create hierarchies in race and placing Caucasians on the top. And Pseudoscience and Bias, Painter critiques the flawed logic and unscientific methods used to justify the racial classification. This laid the groundwork for centuries of systematic racism. It emphasizes whiteness as a racial identity is not innate or biological, but a social construct rooted in historical and political agendas. So that was a summary. We'll also have a video that we'll be watching to summarize, because this is a deep book. So we're just going to be reading with you, to you, and you can ask questions along the way, and maybe a little bit of explanation. But I think the book is going to lay out the foundation and prove itself within the reading and black and white words. So every Tuesday at 3 at our 3 Real Lives, we'll get you to all the platforms. We'll see you Tuesday. Back to you, kid.
Okay, you just had to add your little deep voice in there. Okay, perfect. So I'm glad she gave us a good summary, so we can feel free, I can feel free to go ahead and jump around and give you guys some quotes. So of course, we're going to try to stick, me personally, since I've already know the whole overall summary of this book, I don't want to jump too far ahead to things that I already know for self. So I'm going to try to keep it with the chapter by chapter by chapter. But since she mentioned the term of of race. It does describe it in this chapter, but we're going to be speaking about chapter 1, the Greeks and the Scythians. But I'm just going to show you guys a quick chart, because not only does this book give us a lot of context, a lot of historical facts, a lot of dates, a lot of time periods, it also gives us the original charts. So I won't show you the one that was used for the concept of beauty, but I am going to show you one that put Caucasians at the top of the list. So when it comes to race, I want to make it very clear to my audience and my readers that race was only for these people that, like she said, come from the Caucasus Mountains. Today it will be near present day Russia and Ukraine, but we'll speak about that as well. But let me see if I can find the charts. This is just off topic. It's in here. I always refer to it on anything else I'm doing. So let me see if I can find this chart really quick. Because the book gives us lots of faces, places, and charts that were used at this time in order to justify. Here is the chart. Okay, so one of them. I'm going to show you guys just this chart. And I won't discuss it. I'm just going to show you guys the chart really quick. You can't see it, but it's on page 287. So this is a chart, for example, that is going to use to break down the races at the time. And if you notice, I'll just tell you who's at the top. It says England is at the top, and at the bottom it says the Negro draft. Put that in your image of what we're dealing with as far as when it comes to Caucasian, because primarily it's going to be speaking about a lot about England or Europe and the continent, right? So I just wanted to show you guys that quick chart, and this was Bringham's bar graph chart of mental test results. So later on we'll discuss it, because that's another thing that we have to deal with, especially here in America, with race being a big play. The reason why a lot of people that of color, black people, could not vote, they had to pass a literacy test, things like that. That all goes back to the foundation and the foundation and the formation of this concept called race. For those who just came in on Instagram, we're reading The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. So make sure you guys have it. So the first chapter speaks about the Greeks and the Scythians, but we're not going to read too much into it. I'm going to read you the first paragraph, then we'll jump around to who the Greeks and Scythians are. If you know Greeks, you should know by their culture, they stole everything from Egypt. Egypt is actually a Greek term. You will hear people, especially on social media, refer to Africa or Egypt as Kemet. That would be the original term before the Greeks took over and stole everything that they know from actually Kemet, Egypt. There's another name called Alkeban. It can go further. The further back you go, the deeper it gets with the originality of the name. So just keep that in mind, that when we're speaking and we mention the term Greek, that they stole everything they know from Kemet, which is now modern day Egypt, right? So it speaks about this in chapter 1. I'll just read the first paragraph. We'll jump through. You guys should have finished chapter 1. Where there are white people in antiquity. Certainly some assume so, as though categories we use today could be read backwards over the millennia. People with light skin certainly existed well before our own times, but did anyone think they were white or that their character related to their color? No, for neither the idea of race nor the idea of white people had been invented, and people's skin color did not carry useful meaning. What mattered was where they lived. Were their lands damp or dry? Were they fertile or prone to impotence, hard or soft? Could they be seduced by the luxuries of civilized society, or were they warriors through and through? What were their habits of life? Rather than as white people, Northern Europeans were known by vague tribal names, Scythians and Celts, then Gauls, and then Germani. So I like to point out that I like how the author actually used tribal names, because in Africa, in Kemet, and Alkeban, whatever name so fits you going further back, we actually came from micronations. You'll hear me refer to that often throughout the book club and any book we're reading. We came from micronations. It was a post that said, how could people think, it was Dr. Umar they were asking, is why do you refer to all of black people or black people and around the African diasporas as kings, as queens, because there's only one king and there's only one queen. And he had a powerful response saying, there's multiple kings and queens. Have you not been to Africa, basically? So I like to call them micronations. Our families were micronations within a larger section of this continent called Africa. But I like how the author pointed out these tribal names, because when you start speaking of tribal, it is actually denoting certain things. But the tribal names were Scythians, the Celts, the Gauls, and the Germani. So I want to point that out. Who are the Scythians? In chapter, page 2, paragraph 2. Page 1, paragraph 2. It says, but if one asks, say, who are the Scythians? The question sets us off down a slippery slope. For over time, and especially in earlier times, any search for the ancestors of white Americans perforce leads back to non-literate peoples who left no documents describing themselves. Thus, we must sift through the intellectual history Americans claim as Westerners, keeping in mind that long before the science dictated the terms of human difference as race, long before racial scientists began to measure heads and concoct racial theories, ancient Greeks and Romans had their own means of describing peoples of their world as they knew it more than 2 millennia ago. And inevitably, the earliest accounts of our story are told from on high by rulers dominant at a particular time. Power affixes the markers of history. So you'll always hear that this about history, right? Anybody who's in power is the people who write the stories. So like when you refer to our history books in the United States, you can't always depend on it all being factual to the party, because it's the people who are in power who wrote the history books to know what they tell you what they want you to know so that they can remain in power. Keep that in mind. So again, we'll speak about this obsession with purity is where the term whiteness comes from, the obsession of being pure. And this term actually started with now what we call white groups or white races. It did not even include black people at the time. If you jump down on page 2, it refers to the Caucasus Mountains, like our hostess was telling you, how it came from this mystic thing about the Caucasus being the most beautiful people there, which I don't think ever actually existed. No offense, but I don't think that was ever true. This was just targeted and personalized for that region and for the person who came up with this theory, right? So the Caucasus Mountains was this mythological place, right? And it says here on page 2, last paragraph, that the northern Caucasus Range forms a natural border with Russia. I wanted to point that out because, of course, you know about the war that's taking place right now, and you have Ukraine and Russia fighting over basically the same territory in which it is. I want to show you guys this picture here of the Black Sea. If you don't have the book, this is just an old map of the Black Sea. Today, the Black Sea region today. So to the Greeks, this is on page 3. It says, one can see that to the Greeks, almost anything goes on the Caucasus. So if you put that in perspective now, on the Caucasus Mountain, anything goes. Now in society and those who have power, anything goes. From police brutality to oppression, anything goes. To re-electing a president that has 34 counts of a felony, anything goes, right? So I thought that was very relatable in our given time. Then if you jump down on page 3, I want to point out how it says, the last paragraph on page 3, underlining the idea that all people originated between the Black and Caspian Seas, is the text of Genesis 8:1, which has Noah's Ark coming to rest on the mountains of Ararat after the flood. So I'm going to divert your attention really quick. Hopefully the hostess with the mostest, I can't share to the screen. You know that from last time, right? So pull this up with me as I Google it. I want you to Google. Let's see. Who else could share something? Yeah, it's not going to let me. So if you can, I want you to type in on your Google, and I'm going to show you guys this as well, because this is also where the foundations of purity, the foundations of these people saying that they should be in power and beauty comes from, and it all comes from religion. Remember, I said that race was man-made and constructed by man, but also was religion, right? So if you go into Google, I want you to type Mount Ararat, okay, and just bring that up. A-R. Okay.
And don't forget, pull up the video.
If we have time, because I'm on a wing here, so I will though. Okay, so it refers to Genesis 8:1 on page 3, and it says that basically all people originated between the Black and the Caspian Seas in the text of Genesis 8:1, which has Noah's Ark coming to rest on the mountains of Ararat after the flood. Everybody should know about that, right? Noah's Ark is a big famous thing, right? I just want to read to you guys the brief scripture for Genesis 8:1. It says, but God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth and the waters receded. So this is the justification for those in power, the Greeks, the Scythians, the people from the Caucasus region, justifying that this is where the foundation of the world basically comes from, of man originated between the Black and the Caspian Seas. Now, hostess with the mostest, did you look up Mount Ararat, and please read to me what it says?
It's not on the screen?
No, you can't share. It doesn't let us. Unless you use it. Oh, you on your phone. You on your computer doing it or your phone? Just read to where is it located? Can you read that out loud? Hello? Okay, I think we lost her. So she'll jump back in. So I'm just going to show you guys a quick little photo of Mount Ararat right here. Okay, maybe there she is. That's Mount Ararat. Let's go back to the Zoom. Let's let her back in. One moment. All right, you're back. Go ahead and read to us what you see, what it says.
What do you want me to read? According to the book of Genesis, the Old Testament, Noah's Ark landed on Mount Ararat, Genesis 8.4.
And where is it located?
Oh, okay. Hold up. This is on Wikipedia. Mount Ararat, or Mount Agin, is a snow-capped and dominant compound volcano in eastern Turkey. It consists of two major volcano cones, Greater and Little Ararat.
Okay.
It's at the highest peak of Turkey.
Perfect. So clearly, as you can see, that there is discrimination in the text of religion, and also taking away the fact that people did not originate in Turkey. So now I want you to go ahead and Google, and also as something to point out, as I should have said, is that Mount Ararat, it described it as a volcano. Clearly it's stating as a mountain. So now I want you to type the same thing in, how was so hostess with the Moses, and type in South Africa. So I'll go on to say that while you're bringing it up, and then you can read it to us. In Limpopo, South Africa, there is a mountain that is called Mount Ararat. It is actually a mountain, and it's not a volcano. So that actually would be where the foundation of people come from. So if you can see where the term of whiteness comes into play and race comes into play, all to use religion in order to back their stance that God put the first people in between the Black and the Caspian Sea, is actually false. Genesis 8:1. Mount Ararat in Turkey, again, just to reiterate, is a volcano.
Mount Ararat is in Western Cape, South Africa. But the whole concept of race didn't come until after the started about the 1600s.
Yes.
With the onset of the transatlantic.
Okay, we're losing you, but can you read what it says? We're losing you.
Am I?
Now you're back. Can you just read what it says, Mount Ararat?
Hold up.
In South Africa.
Okay. No, it's not.
Okay.
I can't find it.
That's okay. So we're going to keep moving on. So if the picture's not coming up, here it goes here. This is just...
here we go. Mount Ararat is located on... I don't know why it's coming up different. It's in
Limpopo, South Africa, but that's okay. Go ahead. Are you going to read it or?
No. It's in the region of Limpopo, South Africa, but I can't get any other stuff on it.
That's all I needed you to say. So great. So that is me backing up with not only history but geographical facts that according to this right here, the foundation of people is why we're talking about race, and the Caucasus Mountains being the most pure, right, of race, because they're using as to justify that in religion. Genesis 8:1, people originated between the Black and the Caspian Sea. So I'm going to go on to read on page 3. It goes on to say, in the 13th century, Marco Polo located Mount Ararat in Armenia. just south of Georgia and eastern Turkey, at the juncture of Armenia, Iraq, and Iran, and in the country of the Kurds. At any rate, Mount Ararat at 5,185 meters, or some 17,000 feet high, is Turkey's highest mountain and is still believed to many to mark the site of the post-Devonian human history in Western Asia, nor have recent events lessened its importance. So that's where I'm giving you guys for that chapter there. Just do your own research and look into it. It specifically states that Mount Ararat is a volcano in Turkey, and that the only Mount Ararat is actually in South Africa, and it describes it on Google now as a mountain. So use that. Go make sure you use your references, and Google, use your real eyes and look for yourself. We'll jump on to page 4. So the last paragraph on page 4, we're speaking again. This chapter is called the Greeks and the Scythians. So I told you a little bit about who the Greeks and Scythians are, but let's break their names down. So on the second paragraph, it says the Scythians, for instance, they simply meant little known, northeastern, or illiterate, Stone Age peoples, and the Celts denoted hidden people, painted people, strange people, and barbarians to the west. So as you can see, this is where race is coming into play, as they use these terminologies in order to divide amongst each other. And when I say they, I'm meaning white in societal terms, right? It goes on to say that we cannot know what those people called themselves, for the Greeks' name stuck, nor can we know how many of those situated in northern, western, and eastern Europe 2,000 or 3,000 years ago or earlier became the biological ancestors of the 19th century German, English, and Irish people, and 20th century Italian, Jews, and Slavs. We know from Greek descriptions of their habits that whether chiefs or slaves, all had light-colored skin. So again, they're talking about in antiquity, it did not matter about skin color necessarily. It mattered what you have, where you have a flourishing land, a fertile land, were you able to were you coerced by lavish lifestyles, or did you have good character, good personality? That's what it was about in antiquity, not necessarily anything on color. People were lighter than others.
I like that. I like that when they said he deduced, what was his name? If you had a wet abdomen or moist abdomen, and then you couldn't get pregnant, and if you're by the water, then the women were bigger, and you think that stopped productivity, and they were happier. I was like, well, maybe because they could fish and grow food, and they didn't have to hunt and be in shape. I was kind of laughing at that, and how the men were transvestites.
Yeah,
if they had more if they couldn't for some reason they would make themselves a transvestite if they couldn't keep an erection.
Yeah, and the author is a woman. It's not a man.
Huh?
The author, you keep saying it's a she.
No, I'm saying the notes that she got it from. Whoever wrote the 1,000 years ago. He and how too much horse riding might make you what is it called? Not fertile, and cutting the back of your ear. But anyway, he had all of these assumptions on different peoples and the coloring, and like you said, the color, they had nothing to do with race. It was just the reason why you this color, or the reason why you're fatter or juicier, because you're by the water. Reason why you can't do this is if you have a harsh weather, then you might have this ruddy skin, or if you have this, it was no concept of the real race that we do now. And that was it. Bye.
Correct. Okay, on page 5, it goes on to break down again. We're speaking about chapter 1, the Greeks and the Scythians. So these are the main people who were the founders of this whole race thing, and thinking they were the most pure. Okay, and so it says that on page 5, Africa meant Egypt and Libya. Asia meant Persia as far to the east as India. Europe meant Greece and neighboring lands as far west as Sicily. Western Turkey belonged to Europe because Greeks lived there. So as you can see again, that's why I mentioned Turkey, Mount Ararat. I mentioned South Africa because the Greeks, who have influenced majority of the culture for the Europeans and stole everything that they know from Kemet. It's important to understand how they break down. In the chart, I also showed you how the Europeans were on the top. This is because this is where they found Europe meant Greece, and so on and so forth. Okay. Then if you jump down to the second paragraph, it says that distance was all, for travel went at the speed of foot and hoof. Scythians roamed from Georgia in the Caucasus and the lands around the Euxine, which is the Black Sea, to the steppes of Ukraine and on east to Siberia. Interestingly, the word Ukraine, and this is what I wanted to speak about, given that the war is happening between these, it's important that we understand the foundations on what they're fighting for, the same piece of land. Ukraine stems from Polish and Russian language roots, meaning the edge of the world. Russian and Ukrainians who now claim ancient Scythians as glorious ancestors look to Yalta and the Crimea as their ancestral home. You'll always hear about Russia referring to the Crimea as well. So just keep that in mind when you're hearing things out there in the world, okay? What else do we want to discuss? One of the first historians for the New World will be the father of historian, which is Herodotus. If you guys heard about him, a little bit about Herodotus. Let's see, where can we give you a quote? So on page 6, it's important that you know who Herodotus is, but he was born 70 years after Hecataeus. Herodotus of Halicarnassus had an advantage and he seized it, gaining acclaim as the West's first systematic historian, indeed as the father of history, a title given to him by the great Roman orator Cicero. So lasting was Herodotus' reputation that his likeness, real or imagined, was carved in a stone in Greece a century or so after his death and copied later in Rome. He was born and raised what is now Western Turkey and traveled widely, took good notes, and produced the first unified world history encompassing Egypt, quote-unquote Africa, Western Asia, quote-unquote Asia, and as well as Greece, quote-unquote Europe, where early scholars have repeatedly hearsay. Herodotus seems actually to have visited Egypt, Babylonia, the Balkans, and the Black Sea region. He also most likely reported on Scythians as an eyewitness account. So you're getting a lot of this information that we know from history, and especially of those in power, from Herodotus, okay? Seeing that he was in most of these places, but also if you see where he's from, usually people, what is it called? Favor where they're from, right? He was from Turkey, and it just goes hand in hand. Yeah, put 2 and 2 together. Okay, let's see here. Something else. So this chapter will speak a lot about Herodotus, but that is a little bit of the information that you should know. I won't go into too much of that. Okay, so we'll kind of just stop there, see if I can pull up the video. Okay, so if you know about Hippocrates, so let's go back. Just read that a little bit. So Hippocrates, I always say his name wrong, but on page 9, second paragraph, he was ancient Greece's greatest physician and the father of Western medicine from the Greek island of Kos, off the coast of Herodotus, Halicarnassus in Western Turkey. Also wrote widely and with great confidence on many other matters at the peak of Greek imperial power in the 3rd and 4th century BCE. His De Ared Akis Et Locis, Airs, Water, and Places, a universal encyclopedia from 400 BCE, includes the barbarian ways of the Scythians, Asians, and Greeks, and true to his medical interests, their practices of sexuality and reproduction. So that's kind of what she was referencing about the being in certain places and the sexuality of individuals depending on how close they were to the sea and things like that. It comes from Hippocrates, okay? And then also, let's jump over. That's what I wanted to read. So it says on page 10, last paragraph, though Hippocrates, I'm going to say his name, places various Scythian tribes in a number of different regions and assigns them to an array of body types, he oddly concludes that they all look more or less alike. Some live along Ukrainian Sea of Azov and the mild northern bay of the Black Sea, also known in antiquity as Palus Myotis, on the border region between Hippocrates, Europe, and Asia. Others inhabit a cold, humid region and drink water from snow and ice. With Hippocrates, believed had an effect on skin color. The Scythians are a ruddy race because of the cold, not through any fierceness of the sun's heat. It is the cold that burns their skin, their white skin, and turns it ruddy. This is from Hippocratic Oath. Exactly, Alon. Hippocratic Oath, Hippocrates, yes, same thing. And that's where it comes from. He stole basically everything, again, that he knows from Kemet. But yes, that's where it comes from. Now I'm going to try to pull up a video. Do you have the link that you can just put in the chat, perhaps?
You can put it in the chat. Hold on.
I'll try to pull it up. Again, you won't be able to see it because I cannot share.
Okay, I'll remember.
So let me know when you put it in the chat and we'll go on and continue reading. So I'll just read the last paragraph on this chapter. To conclude, chapter 1, which is the Greeks and Scythians, it says on page 15, we'll read that paragraph. Whatever the truth of the self-serving story, power relations clearly ruled that day, and powerful would have their due. According to Herodotus, once again, every 5th year, the Colchians and peoples around them traditionally paid a tribute to Persia of 100 boys and 100 girls. Already well established in Herodotus' time, this levy's origin could not be traced, and it must have continued long past the days of Herodotus. For more than 300 years later, the Greek historian Polybius of 203 to 120 BCE notes that Black Sea origin of life's everyday necessities, cattle, and slaves. Indeed, the slave trade from the Black Caspian Sea region of people later considered white continued for more than 2,000 years, ending only with the Ottoman modernization at the turn of the 20th century. Such was the lot of masses of Europeans in ancient Greece. So next week we'll read about Romans, Celts, Gauls, and Germany. But this is breaking down the tribes themselves and where we got the foundations of race from. So I'm going to try to go ahead and pull up this quick video.
Yeah, there's 2 different videos.
Okay, we only have time for one. So I'm going to try to pull up this quick video. We have 7 minutes left. Unless you want to go on Instagram and we can go a little longer. So let's see here. Can I get the name of that book? Yes. It's on the page. If you go on our page, make sure you like it. But it is called The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. So we'll be reading this book. We just started. You have time to jump on in. Okay, this is not the author, but I guess we'll see what he has to say.
Is that a black guy?
Yeah, so we'll listen to this video and get an idea of someone else that has reviewed the book, and he'll kind of explain the history of whiteness. We'll only listen to it for about 4 minutes or so. We don't have enough time to finish it. Okay.
The name of the video is The History of Whiteness. This is coming from Tim Weiss. The History of Whiteness. Let's do this, guys. We're here.
Say that again. The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember.
Okay, so we're definitely going way back in history.
During the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people.
Mid-1600s.
Okay, this isn't the book, though.
Yes, it is. He references it.
Yeah, no one called themselves white at all. They called themselves German, Swedish.
Oh, okay, no, that's not the right one.
Okay, so that's okay. So basically, they are speaking facts. The first 46 seconds is factual. This term of white people, and especially in the colonial terms coming to America, was all used to justify slavery. But this term was actually used for the people that we consider white now. So like the guy also just said, they called themselves Germans, they called themselves Scythians, they called themselves Greeks. Just like us in Africa, we weren't Africans. We were, call me Kush, call me Nubia, call me a lot of other names, but don't call me whatever you think you are, like my grandfather would say. So Africa even comes from the power people, the white people who wanted to put a name on this vast continent that was glorious and that was fertile and that they wanted to conquer. So when you're speaking about the history of white people, just know that it's man-made once again, just like religion is man-made. It was used to justify oppression. It was used to justify slavery, but it actually began with those white people themselves. I showed you the chart. Let's see if I can bring it up again. Do you have anything to add? Let's see. We got 4 minutes. I can show the chart one more time.
Try this one, Naila. I just sent you one.
No,
so
we can
watch video.
We can watch it next week because we're gonna. It's gonna.
But it's about. Okay. All right.
We only have 4 minutes.
Okay.
So, do you want to follow us on Instagram to watch it, or you just?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so we'll bring it up next week. That's no problem. So yeah, the history of white people, that is it. I got lost and distracted. So again, just remember that it was constructed by the dominant people just to justify their domination and oppression. And I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the most. We'll finish reading. No worries, Alana. You said focus. Okay. No. I'm focused. We're good. So we're going to go ahead and we'll finish reading. Make sure you read next week. Chapter 2, Romans, Celts, Gauls, and Germany. Remember, these people broke themselves up into names, but then they started dividing amongst each other in order to justify their domination of other groups. At the time, the Negro, the African, we weren't even considered in this chart. We weren't even considered as people until they wanted to come and conquer us. So just keep that in mind. And remember, the Scythians, meaning illiterate at this time, and also the Greeks stole everything that they know from Kemet, also called Alkeban, whichever name so have you. But we're R3, we're eyes, we're lives, we're lives. Well, we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She'll close us out. Again, we're reading History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter.
This is Howard So, hostess with the mostest. We're here at our 3 Real Lives Book Club, where we meet every Tuesdays at 3. You can reach us and locate our campaigns and what book we're reading at R3 Real Lives, where that will take you to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, as well as a website, where all those platforms you can like, share, and follow for free. If you're so in kind and you want to donate, you can go on the website and you will be able to donate $1, $1 million, whatever you fancy. We take it all. And we appreciate you listening. Right now, we're at the history of white people, and we're talking about the construct of whiteness that was formulated only a few hundred years ago. 1,000 years ago, they were just people in different regions, and they had different beliefs and different ideals, and had nothing to do with race per se, more to do with social status and hierarchy. But the whiteness, no coincidence, began in the late 1600s. And what else began in the 1600s? Oh, the transatlantic slave trade, which is different than the slavery that they already had ongoing, because that wasn't based on a racial group. That was just based on the region that they were in. Anyway, like I said, you can reach us at our 3 Real Lives every Tuesdays. Our times may change, but we are always there on Tuesdays, and you can get the information on the website. Like, share, follow for free. Please do that on all 4 platforms at our 3 Real Lives. See you next Tuesday. Threes.
All right, like she said, we'll see you next Tuesday. Make sure you check us out. I'll be uploading all the videos to YouTube, so check it out. And the chart I just showed you again gives a breakdown. That was for mental aptitude, but we'll get to that later in the chapter, and it just shows the different races of people at that time. All right, we'll see you next week. I'm Naila, your CEO and your founder of the Real Book Club and R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. Peace, or we say 3. And yes, Alon says slavery based on economic status and political views. Exactly what we're speaking about. Exactly.
Oh, hi,
All right.
Alon.
You got a hi there. So yeah, it's 37 seconds left. So yeah, you're correct about that. And it's all about power struggle in order to keep certain groups of people oppressed, and the oppressors keep themselves on high. So make sure you catch us next week. Purchase the book. And again, Alon, it's tagged on the video. You know, I always post what book we're reading, so you can check it out if you didn't capture the name or how to spell it. The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. We're out. We're the Real Book Club. See you next week. Peace.